All right, Indiana defeats Purdue 73-58 Sunday afternoon at Assembly Hall. With our Indiana Hoosiers on SI postgame reaction video, I'm Jack Ankeny, joined by Todd Golden. And Todd, this was a really crazy game. You know, Indiana trailed by 12 points at halftime. I think we were saying Purdue went on a 21-4 run at the end of the first half, and Indiana completely flips the script in the second half, 28-4 run or 28-3 run to open the second half. So a really crazy swing. A ton to discuss from this game, but just your initial takeaways and kind of the how you thought Indiana got this one done.
I mean, talk about a game that flipped on its head. I mean, IU players got booed coming off the court at halftime, and it's been a rough year here inside Assembly Hall in terms of Indiana letting leads slip, and then came out, and it was somewhat supernatural to start the first, especially the first 5 minutes of the first half, where Purdue gave Indiana a little bit of an inch. They hit a couple shots right at the beginning of the half, and then Purdue couldn't stop giving the ball away. Yeah. I mean, Indiana took advantage of quite a few turnovers. I think Indiana had 17 points off turnovers in the second half alone.
Yeah, 23 total, and most of those are in the second half.
And so, it just became kind of the classic case of a boulder rolling downhill. Purdue didn't know what hit them.
Yep.
And that's a credit to Indiana for not giving in. They've given in some games this year. You think of the big blowout games in particular, where they didn't muster any kind of gumption to have the toughness to come back. And today they didn't, and showed some pride. And it was Purdue who gave in, and probably one of the worst Purdue performances I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like at halftime, it was obviously Indiana, I think, only scored 4 points in the last 9 minutes of the first half. So that's obviously very poor. But I felt like at halftime, I was like, I didn't feel like Indiana was playing particularly bad in the sense of like turning it over a ton or a ton of defensive breakdowns. They only had 4 turnovers in the first half, but they shot 1 for 11 from 3. Purdue was 6 for 11 from 3. So to me, it sort of felt like the first half was kind of just like Indiana's not hitting shots. They had some open ones. Purdue forced them into some tough ones, and Indiana gave Purdue some open ones too. But I felt like at halftime, it was like it was a pretty competitive game for the first 10 minutes. So I didn't feel like it was totally lost at halftime. But Indiana certainly came out and played better in the second half. What did you think sort of were the ways that sort of flipped the game there?
Well, I mean, the one thing, Indiana started the game, the beginning of the game well too, and they, it looked like to me it looked like a classic case of Indiana not being able to handle prosperity, which has been a pattern with them this year. They get a little bit of a good run, and then they kind of get satisfied with it. I thought their defensive will, obviously, if you look at a 21-4 run, wasn't as good.
Yeah,
Purdue was able to get much better shots. Some of Purdue's others got involved. Miles Colvin got hot there for a bit. I think the big key in the second half is that Indiana knuckled down defensively, and I thought it started with Miles Rice defense on Braden Smith. He was in his shirt, forced Braden Smith to do some uncharacteristic things. He dribbled it off his foot once or twice, and even when he didn't force a turnover, it slowed Purdue's offense down to the point where they just didn't have as much time to execute their half-court offense. So I thought it really started with the ball pressure on Smith. I mean, it wasn't just Miles Rice. I mean, Anthony Leal played a role in that, Trey Galloway, but primarily it was Rice who he started it, and he really kind of set the tone. And from there, and then once Indiana hit a couple shots, it happens all the time, where it's funny how your defense gets better when a couple shots go down, and the crowd got into it. I think that certainly helped, and then Indiana just got a belief that they could do it, and Purdue wilted as well. So it was just a combination of Indiana deserves the credit for creating that situation for Purdue. Surprising that Purdue didn't respond better, considering how experienced this team is and their championship pedigree. But hey, I mean, that's a credit to the Hoosiers. I mean, they did what they needed to do. And then in the second half, what was heartening to see is there was no, I wrote on social media at the 8-minute media timeout there was a nervous energy inside Assembly Hall. I think it was a 14-point lead at that point. Indiana fans have seen this team give up leads before, and you could kind of sense that in the crowd. But that never really happened. I think Purdue got it down to 10 maybe.
Yeah.
But
they had it down to 10 a few times with like 4 minutes, 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
A few different times.
Never a serious threat, though. And that's a good sign that the Hoosiers were able to not only come back, but then keep their foot on the gas and keep the Boilermakers from getting any hope.
Yeah, you mentioned Braden Smith. Indiana was able to lock him up today. Indiana also did a great job, I thought, on Trey Kaufman-Renn. He finished with 9 points on 4 for 11 shooting. That's the only game he's been in single-digit scoring all season. Fouled out with, I think, like 4 minutes left. So I thought Indiana did a good job on him defensively. He hit the game winner against Indiana the first time around. So I thought Malik Renew and Ballo really won that matchup. Renew had 15 points, 7 for 7 shooting. Ballo, 12 points, 5 for 7. The other player that's really hurt Purdue in both of these matchups is Trey Galloway. He had 9 assists today, and Purdue really hasn't been able to stop kind of that pick and roll with him. I think after the first game, Painter was talking about, like, we were lucky that Galloway didn't have the ball in his hands at Mackey. So I thought those were some key factors in this one too. And Woodson really sort of just rode that lineup in the second half with Rice, Leal, Galloway, Goody, and then one of Renew or Ballo. That was sort of the 6 that he's shortened it up with.
Yeah, no question. And I wrote in our 3 things story yesterday that one thing I wanted to see IU do was run that pick and roll with Omar Ballo, because Trey Kaufman-Renn is a good player. Caleb Furst is a good player. I don't know that they are adept at guarding that particular play.
Yeah.
And Indiana didn't run it like an inordinate amount today, but they did run it a little bit. That's what sort of kept them going for a while in the first half. And certainly it helped put some foul pressure on Trey Kaufman-Renn, who eventually fouled out. He did have some fouls on moving screens, things like that. But
he picked up his 3rd and 4th really quickly.
Yeah, he did. And but I think Indiana really needs to. I think they've been at their best when they work that play with whether it's Trey or Miles Rice or whoever, to get Omar Ballo on the move into the lane, and he's just difficult to stop when he's in motion. And when he posts up or when he puts the ball on the floor, he stops himself from being effective. And so that was good. And then Omar, when he did get the ball in the paint, he's got good court vision, and he's able to find some people to do some things. So all that was big. Malik Renew was 7 for 7 from the floor. Yep. That doesn't hurt. And so, all in all, in the second half, it's hard to find any fault with any of the performances of the Hoosiers today. It was very efficient.
Yeah, I thought Leal was great defensively too. He had a couple plays where I think Fletcher Lawyer drove and he sort of tied him up. Leal is also sort of has a knack for kind of just being kind of pesky. Like, you could tell that that some opposing teams don't really like, when he sort of just kind of gets in there and, kind of gets.
I think there's the elephant of the room of the play with Caleb Furst under the basket.
Yeah, what do you think of that?
I thought Indiana was pretty fortunate on that. The replay they showed here inside Assembly Hall didn't look that bad. I have benefit of watching the TV feed on mine, and I thought he got away with that one a little bit.
I thought he did too, but I also thought Furst kind of grabbed his arm and
there's no doubt,
sort of tangled up.
But nonetheless, there was contact to a very sensitive area.
Yeah, I was surprised it was just no call in general.
I'm surprised there was no call either. And I'm sure Purdue fans, I have covered Purdue too, and I'm sure they were incensed about it. But yeah, I mean, Leal does have a way of, in a good way, like, Leo's the kind of player, if he's on your team, you'll love him.
Yeah.
Because he fights hard. And, another play that Leo made that I thought was really savvy. This was, I believe, in the first half still. There was a ball scramble, came all the way down it was on.
When he just dove.
It was on Purdue's side of the floor. And he and Braden Smith were basically in a dead heat to get the ball. Well, what he did was Anthony kind of leaned in just enough. He did have a little bit of an inch of an edge on him. And when Braden Smith made contact with him, Anthony sold it a little bit,
Yeah.
which I'm not criticizing him. I think that's a savvy play to make. And Braden Smith had the foul called on him. So those are the little things that drive opponents crazy.
Yep.
And drive opposing fans, nuts. But if it's for your team, you love it because it those plays help you win games.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, Anthony Leal would probably, he gets the biggest cheers here at Assembly Hall. It's not just because he's a Bloomington product. I think it's because he plays hard. And and I think fans appreciate that, and they should. It's it's something that this team feeds off of and needs.
Yeah, he there's some games where you'll look at the box score and Leal will have like 0 points or 2 points in one shot, and he's still finding a way to impact the game. This one, the stat sheet looks a little bit better for him. 8 points, 3 for 4 shooting, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. So really contributing in a variety of ways. I thought he was huge for Indiana today. Couple killer stats for Purdue: the 16 turnovers. Indiana scored 23 points off of those. Indiana also had 44 points in the paint. Excuse me. I think when I was doing some prep for this game, there was some stat that Purdue was like outside the top 300 in opponent 2-point field goal percentage and block percentage in terms of their defense. And you kind of mentioned that with Kaufman, Wren, and First. They're good players, but they're not necessarily the intimidating shot blockers or kind of defensive stalwarts that like Zach Edey. Not everyone can be Zach Edey, but like that's definitely something that I think is missing with this team. And that their Daniel Jacobson has been hurt too. Their freshman who's like 7'4". They tried to play Will Berg a little bit today, and he picked up 2 quick fouls. So I thought that really hurt Purdue too. But I guess with this one, just sort of in the big picture, Indiana improves to 16-11, 7-9 in Big Ten play. We've sort of mentioned that they're still hanging around the NCAA tournament picture, and this is arguably their biggest win of the season. They picked up a big one a couple of weeks ago at Michigan State, which was huge. I think Lenardi had them as his 7th team out in his latest bracketology. So you got to think this one puts them very close to that line. What do you sort of think about the impact of this win?
You look at the bubble, the teams that are around Indiana. I mean, it's an indictment of how really poor the bubble is. I mean, most of the teams that Indiana is competing with for an NCAA tournament bid, think of the Wake Forest, the Vanderbilts, the Oklahomas, SMU, few others, power teams that are struggling in their leagues. Most of them, Villanova, although Villanova I think beat UConn yesterday, most of them have no more than 2 or 3 quad 1 wins. So just getting one more quad 1 win, which I believe this is Indiana's 3rd, because Penn State slipped out of quad 1. Penn State had been in that range. So, so the Ohio State road win, Michigan State road win, and Purdue home win, that's 3 quad 1 wins. They're right back in it. I mean, they just are. And now they have to maintain that. Right. I mean, Penn State comes in here on Wednesday and beats Indiana lights out. That's a poor loss, especially with the way I know Penn State kind of got it won and kind of got it together in their last game, but they've been really struggling. So it's important. It needed to be done to have a chance, but Indiana can't just, they can't rest on that. And then Indiana goes out to the West Coast for a challenging 2-game trip. So it's huge. It's better than the alternative without question, but there's still a lot more work to do.
Right. I think you got to probably win at least 2 of the next 4, I would think. I'm not a bracketologist, but you'd think with Penn State and Ohio State and Washington and Oregon, if you get 2 of those, at least you're probably feeling pretty good.
In particular, because that would be a quad 1 win.
Yeah.
You're in really good shape. Beating Washington, I mean, you have to have it. Washington struggled so much that won't even be a quad 1 road win. That's how far off the Huskies have been. But you beat Oregon away. That's a 4th quad 1 win. Ohio State comes in. There won't be a quad 1, but it certainly would help. And, Indiana, one thing they tend to do under Woodson, I think you could say that this is a trend, they tend to finish the very end of the season.
Yeah.
Pretty good. They did last year too. They
Yep.
won
Beat
5 in a
Michigan
row.
State.
One at Maryland and Minnesota. Neither one of those teams were great last year, but those weren't expected to be wins. So who knows? Maybe they capture some of that magic again and put themselves in a position where they could truly contend to be in the NCAA tournament.
Yep. So, I mean, I think you're right, Todd. I think Indiana has kind of, you got to give them credit for all the adversity that's come with this season, all the negativity that's been around, the fact that Woodson will be gone after the season. You got to give them credit for continuing to recognize that even though the season was, I think they'd lost 8 of 10 at one point. For as bad as things were going, they still recognized that they had a chance to salvage something, and I think you got to give them credit for that.
I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very easy to get caught up, and I'm not trying to be Pollyanna and say that this win all of a sudden makes up for the rest of the season, because it doesn't. I mean, Indiana should have won their 3 previous home games.
Yeah, imagine if they hadn't lost to Maryland, Michigan, Purdue, Northwestern, all those close losses.
But I've been doing this a long time, and I've been around teams even that didn't have anything to fight for NCAA tournament-wise, that pulled it together late, and at least, if for no other reason, gave themselves a reason to fight at the end of the year. It can happen. And, this is a weird situation with a lame duck coach, and it could have gone either way, and it could still go either way. It's not over yet. I mean, like I said, you lose to Penn State on Wednesday, and all this good feeling is out the window.
Right.
But this team has demonstrated that it's willing to fight, and that sounds like that should be a given, but it isn't always a given. And this team has demonstrated today in particular that they don't want to give up. They still want to at least reach some of their goals, and that's good to see.
Yep. I think you're right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Like I said, Indiana improved to 16-11, 7-9 in the Big Ten. They stay at home to host Penn State on Wednesday. I think you can call that one a must-win, just in terms of where Indiana's at with the NCAA tournament. And then they head out to the West Coast. So for our Indiana Hoosiers on SI post-game reaction video, I've been Jack Ankeny. He's Todd Golden. And we'll talk to you Wednesday at Assembly Hall after Indiana's game against Penn State. See you then.
Thanks.